same team.
That's the realm of the Shadow King.
Priorities have changed, Charles.
April! I think the world's ending.
Then let's begin.
The first thing Matteusz felt when he was suddenly awoken was dread. The second thing was surprise that someone was frantically knocking on the window of the car he was tightly squeezed into. As he raised his still sleepy head slightly, he knew that it wouldn't be his cousin. His cousin had the keys to the car. It was her car after all. She would just open the door and gently nudge him awake if she needed him. Bolting upright, he hit his head roughly on the roof of the car, sending a sharp jolt of pain through him. He swore loudly in Polish as he rubbed his head and looked out of the window. His worst fears were confirmed when he saw Tanya standing there, a very worried expression on her face as she knocked on the window again and gestured for him to roll it down. He did so, and before he could open his mouth to speak, she did.
This is bad. This is really bad.
What's wrong?
A dull pain went through Matteusz's heart as he spoke those words. 2 words, like love you, for so long, or almost succeeded. Words so simple in saying, and yet so complicated in what stories they led to. He knew there was trouble, which of course meant that Charlie was in trouble. He almost cursed himself at the thought. Despite everything that had happened, he couldn't help but feel concerned for Charlie. He loved Charlie. Oh God, how he loved Charlie. That was never going to change, despite everything that had happened, and a tiny part of him hated himself for that.
Oh, what do we do?
Before Matteusz could ask how she'd found him, she continued frantically. It was Charlie's idea. I don't know why he thought it was a good idea, and now I don't know where they are. They're lost. This was really bad. Lost. How? Where? A memory interrupted Matteusz's thoughts, grabbing his mind tightly.
If you are ever lost, I will find you. I will be your hope.
He had said that. No, he had promised that. He was shaken from the memory by the realization that Tanya was still talking, ever more panicked. And when you think about it, it was sort of Quill's fault, but Charlie did it. She gave him the homework, remember?
What are you saying?
He took it too far, and Tanya broke off. She started to sob, completely overtaken by what horrible events had occurred that day. Matteusz felt a shiver run up his spine as he wondered what possibly could have happened. Seeing how shaken Tanya was, however, he rolled the window down as far as it could go and stretched out of it, pulling Tanya into a tight hug, holding her as she sobbed.
Look at me. Look at me. Breathe with me.
For a moment the pair were silent as Tanya took a few long deep breaths in and out, Matteusz gently patting her on the back as she did so. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. That's it. Let it out. It's going to be okay, Tanya, whatever it is. Then she pulled back from Matteusz, rubbing her wet eyes with the corner of her sleeve. Sorry, she said, looking down at the ground. I'm just really worried about them. He nodded firmly in response.
You wouldn't have a heart if you did not care.
I know, but it's never been like this. Even with the Lankin and that Scandus thing, I knew we were all still around and that we'd be able to figure something out. But this time...
We really are on our own.
Without speaking, Matteusz clambered through the window frame in one surprisingly agile movement. Tanya just stared at him, unsure if what she'd just witnessed had really happened or whether she'd just imagined it. At Tanya's surprised look, he merely said, when first coming to England, I had to get through a horrible place of narrow gaps and packed madness, like sardines. You mean the underground? She replied, before shaking her head slightly, dismissing the thought. This could wait. They had to find the others, if they could. Listen, she said. They were in Charlie's house when they disappeared, and then she stopped, begging in her mind, please don't ask, please don't ask, please don't. As if sensing her thoughts, Matteusz asked the dreaded question, I was not invited, and he gave her a hurt look that would give any wounded puppy a run for its money. The look disappeared almost as swiftly as it had appeared, and she sighed, unsure what she could say to him. For all Charlie was no longer speaking to Matteusz, the rest of them still did. But not inviting him? Well, that was sure to have felt like taking sides. Not waiting for a response, Matteusz turned his face away from Tanya, looking down both ends of the street, thinking, calculating, and then he bolted off to the right, the quickest way to Charlie's house. She rushed after him, pulling in enough breath to shout, "Wait!" Matteusz stopped in his tracks, already at the corner of the street somehow, and turned back to her as she caught up to him. Taking deep breaths, she prepared herself for what she knew was going to be a very difficult explanation.
There's something you need to know. Something I didn't tell you.
She says, as the look of concern on her face grows into one of horror. I have a bad suspicion about where they could be now, because of the homework. Matteusz gulped nervously, taking in enough air to steel himself for what answer he might get, for what might lie ahead after he asks the dreadful question. Tanya, what is this possible place? And then she told him where the others might be. Matteusz gasped. He spun back and sprinted around the corner, headed panically in the direction of Charlie's house even faster, Tanya following as fast as she could, because now Matteusz didn't know what he could possibly do, and that terrified him, because now Tanya realised that if she was right, they might never see their friends again, and most of all because terrible danger was now the greatest understatement ever.
Affection surrounds the age of the understatement. Before this attraction ferments, kiss me properly and pull me apart.
The silence of the hallway was broken by rams sprinting through the doors at one end, their hinges whimpering as they were roughly pushed open. As Ram sprinted down the hallway that was familiar and yet not, he couldn't get what Charlie had said before this madness started out of his head. That this project of his was supposed to go.
Just beyond what you see. Just beyond what you see.
And it was most definitely bloody beyond that. Here he was in what looked like Coal Hill, but almost certainly couldn't be it. It was rotting, dusty and abandoned. A pale imitation of what it should be. Why the hell did Quill think sending Charlie, of all people, a science project assignment was a good idea? He could vaguely hear the rapid footsteps of the folk that were chasing him getting nearer and nearer as he continued to rush down the hallway, turning a corner and then down another hallway and turning another corner and down another hallway. A14, closed door. A15, another closed door. A16, yet another closed door. Ram cursed his luck. He wasn't much of a praying man, but right now he was hoping that God would be kind to him today. A17, A18, he was suddenly overcome by relief when finally he saw an open door ahead of him. Room A19. Thank God for the head's office. He sharply came to a halt and turned towards the open doorway, throwing himself through it, grabbing the wooden door by the handle and swiftly slamming it shut. Panting with exhaustion, he slumped against the wall next to the door. Well, half slumped. The relatively new leg he had seemed to understand the concept of being exhausted just as well as it did the concept of kicking a football. It was only after a few seconds that Ram finally stopped panting and turned his head to find Charlie standing incredibly close to his face.
Whoa.
He jumped back slightly, hitting his side against the door handle and kneeling over with pain. He cursed loudly. "Fuck." "Sorry," replied Charlie, a quizzical look on his face. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." "You are okay, right?" "Yeah, I'm totally okay," scoffed Ram. Charlie's face smiled obliviously. "Really? Great." Ram really hated that clueless grin of Charlie's. God, he could be so painfully thick sometimes. So painfully alien. "Of course I'm not bloody okay with this, you ridiculous nerd. For God's sake, Charlie. You've put us in another universe," he said, jabbing a finger at him. "And now April's probably in the hands of those thugs that are around here." "I'm sure she'll be able to handle on her own until she can find us," he replied. We just need to..." "Oh, piss off." Charlie leant away from Ram. He'd been expecting something like that. Honestly, he couldn't blame him for that remark. It really was his fault that all of this had happened. Quill had set the homework, but he was the one who'd committed to it. And now they were in a different universe. In a school that looked familiar but was distinctly not. And April, yet again because of him, was in trouble.
We need to find the light again.
It was what she had said, but he felt as though that light would never be found. It had been several weeks since she'd nearly lost her life,
Why is everyone looking at me like that?
and she'd certainly lost her body, his thoughts reminded him. Using a morphic resonator may have made that problem appear to be solved, but honestly, there was no solution at all. He knew all too well from the rare occasions back when he was still in a relationship with Matteusz, back before he ruined that as well, where Matteusz would hug him and shudder ever so slightly, where Matteusz would comment that Charlie felt slightly cold and rugged. Morphic resonance was not perfect, and truthfully, even after all this time, with that patchwork attempt of a solution, he still couldn't justify to himself shooting April. And now he was going to have to justify this situation to himself. If they made it out of this one alive, that was. Focusing his sight on Ram's shoes, not wanting to look at him, not wanting to confront the pain that he knew was in his eyes, he sighed. Then the door of the room was thrown swiftly open. The sudden occurrence rapidly pulled Charlie back from his thoughts, only having just enough time to step back before Ram leapt away from the door and into the spot that Charlie had previously been standing in. To the surprise of both, Quill had rushed into the room, her black jacket flapping behind her wildly as she speeded over to the back wall of the room and started tearing books off the shelf that made up most of that wall. Charlie and Ram looked at each other in disbelief, and then at Quill, and then back at each other again. If she'd noticed them when she came in, she certainly didn't make it apparent as she tore book after book from their places. "Quill," said Charlie, uncertainly. Was it wise to disturb her while she was deep in concentration like this? He concluded in his head the answer was probably no. Then Ram shouted, "Quill!" She stopped, a book halfway out of one hand, and turned to Ram. "Let me guess, you want me to explain what I'm doing?" She dropped the book that was in her hand and turned back to the bookshelf, completely emptied by her actions. The two lads stood, slightly amazed by how much carnage she'd somehow managed to fit into the 15 seconds since she came into the room. She sighed and turned back to them, her hands thrown up in irritation. "Right, not behind there then. It's got to be here somewhere. Got to be." "What is it?" asked Charlie gently. "That you're looking for, I mean. We can help you look for it, you know." Quill laughed slightly. "Don't be ridiculous. I don't need any help. Besides, it would take weeks just to explain it to you two." "Then don't. Just tell us what it looks like. I think we can manage looking for something. If it's something that can help us get April away from those people," said Ram, a touch of worry in his voice. Quill reached a hand forward, motioning Ram to stop talking, and after a moment of consideration she replied, "All right. It's like a small blue metal box, hexagonal prism shaped." Immediately Charlie rushed off to the shelves on one side of the room and started digging through the many odd trinkets on them, while Quill tore apart the chairs. Whatever she was looking for, she was determined to find it. Ram furrowed his brow for a moment, his thoughts thrown back to maths lessons of long, long ago, and after a moment he went to the head teacher's desk, fairly certain that he knew what a hexagonal prism was, and started rummaging through the drawers for one. A few moments passed, the three of them rummaging and rifling through the room, and then suddenly Charlie shouted, "I think I've found it," holding up a strange device in his hand that Ram did not recognise. But Quill had a look of familiarity on her face. She ran over to him and grabbed it from him. "Yes, this is exactly what I was looking for." "What is it?" asked Charlie, perplexed. "Listen, I don't have nearly enough time to explain anything about this little thing, but trust me, Prince, it is very important. I need both of you to believe that we can find the doctor. Really, truly believe it." "You what?" scoffed Ram. "This thing works on belief, as much as I really hate to admit it. Right now, we need the doctor to get us out of this mess. So, if we believe we can find the doctor, this metaphysical engine should be able to take us to a world where the doctor is." At Quill's words, Charlie crossed his arms skeptically. "Do you seriously think this will work? Do you seriously think there's a better idea to be had?" Charlie's silence to this said more than any answer could. "That's what I thought, Prince." Quill shrugged as she turned the dial on the metaphysical engine, and 3 metal legs at the base of it sprung out. She sat it down on the floor between the 3 of them, and as she stood again, Ram spoke. "But if this metaphysical thing works on belief, what if we don't believe it enough? I don't think I like the sound of this." He He pointed a finger at Quill.
Will you really let that stop you?
Quill sighed and knelt again to adjust some of the dials and buttons on the metaphysical engine, replying as she did so without looking up. It's a risk we're going to have to take, especially if you want to have any chance of getting April back. We certainly can't fight whoever these people are without his help. He'll know something about parallel universes. He seems to know the answer to bloody everything. And then the metaphysical engine sprung to life as she finished the last of her adjustments. It pulsed with blue light as it started to whir and hum. Quill stood quickly, looking at the other two firmly. Here we go. Now just think of the Doctor. Believe we can find him. Charlie closed his eyes and braced himself as he thought of the blue box that had dropped onto his world when all hope seemed lost. Ram muttered a quick prayer under his breath as he thought of the old man who had run down the school corridor as he pulled himself up on one leg, readying a chair to attack the Shadowkin during the prom. Quill stood silent, staring down at the metaphysical engine, and she simply thought of how much, right now, she really needed a doctor. In the next instant, the three of them were engulfed in a blue light and felt themselves pulled forward, and like that, they were gone from the room. And they found themselves falling, tumbling through the blue light as it flickered and flashed and flared. And then, just as suddenly as the blue had appeared, it was gone, and they were standing, quite shaken, in darkness. Nothing but darkness. Somehow they could just about make each other out in it, but it made things no less confusing. Ram looked around himself, and then at Quill, perplexed. She gave him an equally baffled look. Troubling thought struck Quill. Maybe the metaphysical engine worked differently in other universes. Then she realised that Charlie had already set off in one direction, transfixed by something they couldn't see. She rushed after him, followed quickly by Ram. "Hello," Charlie said as he continued to rush forward. "Who are you?" Ah! Charlie held his face in pain as he abruptly recoiled back. Ram rushed forwards past an indifferent Quill towards him. "You okay?" "How?" "Hang on." Ram reached his hands out cautiously and found to his surprise that they pressed flat against what seemed to be thin air. He turned his head to Quill. "I think there's a wall or something here." "Oh, of course there is. You haven't been drinking, have you?" Quill quipped. But she found herself regretting that quip when she reached forward and found her hand resting upon the same invisible wall. "Is no one going to ask about the man?" said Charlie, looking at him through the gaps of his fingers, still holding his face. "What man?" Ram queried. Quill turned, looked out across the distance past the invisible wall, and found that she could see, just barely in front of her, a man floating in the darkness, as though caught mid-fall. It was too far to see properly, but undeniably he was there. Her jaw dropped slightly, and a single word slipped from her. "Doctor?" Then she shouted, "Doctor!" No response came from the man. She rolled her eyes in annoyance. "Either he's ignoring us, or he can't hear us." "I don't think that's the Doctor," interjected Ram. "I mean, that guy out there, he doesn't look old. He looks more my age than yours." Quill disregarded the remark, having decided that the man was clearly the more pressing matter. Fiercely, she punched at the invisible wall in front of her. Charlie and Ram stared at her. She punched again, and then pushed her whole weight against it. But it did not move. The man showed no signs of having noticed her or her attempts to break through. "All right then, you two just stand there and let Quill deal with the nasty mean wall all on her own." Taking the hint, the two lads joined her at the wall, putting all their weight into it, much to the surprise of Ram. Charlie threw a punch at the wall, and then another. Ram joined them, and then so did Quill. Just for a second, Quill thought she saw the floating man turn his head ever so slightly, as though he'd heard the faintest of sounds. The three of them continued to push at the invisible wall, Quill almost clawing at it in desperation. Was the man floating in the murky distance ahead going to notice them properly? Charlie stepped back from the wall. For a moment, Quill thought he'd given up. Then, out of nowhere, he threw himself forward at the wall with as much force as he could muster. She had to admit to herself that she'd not seen the prince be so forceful since her last days on Rhodia. Ram punched and punched and punched again and again at the wall, his alien leg keeping him incredibly well balanced as he did so. And then there was a small cracking sound. The wall suddenly felt less solid somehow. Spurred on by the slight glimmer of hope, they kept assaulting the wall. As Ram and Charlie continued to punch, Quill pulled one of her heels off and brought it down upon the wall with all her strength. Another crackle, and then a heart-rending smash. The three of them fell forward in a kaleidoscope of noise and light. On instinct alone, as it cleared, Quill threw a heel away into the darkness and ran forwards towards the man. He looked up at them, finally seeing them from his awkward position, stuck in mid-air. She still couldn't see his face clearly in the darkness, even at this distance. She was convinced it was the doctor.
Okay, Doctor. Hey, listen.
April's in trouble.
Who are you people? I'm sorry, I don't...
I think I may have done something stupid.
The man in front of them opened his mouth to speak again. Before he could, he was consumed in a flare of blue light. Gone. In the blink of an eye. And suddenly, the three found themselves falling through the darkness, helplessly trying to find something to grab onto. They shouted as they fell, picking up speed as the black world around them started to flicker blue, fast and bright, until the trio reappeared in room A19 just as suddenly as they vanished from it, thrown to the floor roughly. As they lay pained on the floor, there was another tiny flicker of blue in the middle of the room, out of which the metaphysical engine fell. It crashed to the floor, dull and cracked. Quill moved first from her position on the floor, carefully edging over to it. She picked it up for a moment, examining it carefully. Then she slumped and weakly tossed it back down. Ram tried to kick the table next to him in frustrated response to this, but his stubborn alien leg refused. That only served to infuriate him even more, and so he threw out a kick with his other leg, which most definitely hit the table with a loud bang. He muttered a pained swear and then rubbed gently at his leg. A solemn silence fell over the room as the three looked at each other. Surprisingly, when it was broken, it was Charlie who did so.
I'm sorry.
But before he could continue, the silence was more thoroughly disturbed by the sudden sound of the office door being thrown open. The three of them rushed to their feet, Quill taking a defensive stand impressively quickly, all things considered. But, despite the madness of the day, none of them were quite prepared for the sight that greeted them as they stood. April, with a gun against her head, grasped tightly around the neck by a scruffy old man in a battered and burnt suit.
April!
You must have come.
What April said next, however, fell on deaf ears, because none of them were looking at April. They were looking past her, at the man holding her at gunpoint, utterly aghast. Somehow the man who held her tight, with a gun pointed at her head and a worryingly deranged look in his eyes, was Mr. Armitage.